All right, there we are. Is it okay with you, sir? Good morning. I hate to break it up, but it's good to have you guys here this morning. Crack the whip. Just go out amongst the crowd and knock them out. It's good to have you here this morning. Hate to break up the fellowship. I know how we enjoy our fellowship, but we want to get on with our Bible class. Before we get into the main part of our class, if you have your Bibles, turn to John chapter 9. I want to be able to look at John chapter 9 for a brief moment, and it's going to have something to do with the rest of the class. John chapter 9. The main theme of John chapter 9 is Jesus heals a blind man. And you know the story. Jesus heals the blind man, and they're questioning about how he had been born blind. Or his disciples asked how he has been born blind. In verse 3, Jesus says, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." As you go through the chapter, there's a contention about how he'd had gained his sight back, and who gave the man the authority to be able to give this man his sight back. And if you fall all the way back down to verse 25, there's a contention about whether Jesus is a sinner or a worker of God. And this contention arises between the Pharisees, who are envious of Jesus, and the man who actually had his sight restored. And beginning at verse 25, the man who had his sight restored said, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see." And then they said to him again, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" And he answered them, "I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" And this is really the key thing I want to touch upon right here. Then they reviled him and said, "You are his disciple. We are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, we do not know where he is from." And the man answered and said to them, "Why, it is a marvelous thing that you do not know where he is from, yet he opened my eyes." So he wanted to be able to have them realize that this man must be from God because he opened my eyes. And yet, this whole time, they're professing to be Moses' disciples. You may remember in Matthew chapter 23, Jesus has this rebuke against the Pharisees and the scribes because they claimed to be followers of the prophets, and they said, well, if we'd have lived back in the days of the prophets, we wouldn't have killed them. And yet he says, well, you're heaping up blame upon your fathers because they're the ones who killed the prophets. They're the ones who persecuted them. We're going to look at a couple of occasions this morning in Numbers chapter 12 and also in Numbers chapter 16 where people are rising up against Moses and his authority. These people claim to be knowing that Moses was from God, yet they only heard the stories of it. Back in Numbers chapter 12 and Numbers chapter 16, they seem to be doubting whether Moses was from God, and they actually lived through the events that Moses conducted. You know, the parting of the Red Sea, the exodus out of the land of Egypt. They got to see the plagues. They got to see the water come out of the rock. They got to see the manna fall from the sky. They got to see all of that, and yet the people who lived in the days of Moses were in doubt whether Moses was from God or not, and yet these people claim to know that Moses is from God. So go ahead and turn to your Bibles back to Numbers chapter 12, and we'll go ahead and look at that. On Wednesday night, we talked about Numbers chapter 11, and we talked about how in Numbers chapter 11, we're beginning a sequence of chapters. Numbers 11, Numbers 12, Numbers 13. Numbers 14 is a continuation of the events in Numbers 13. But Numbers 15 talks a little bit about some of the ceremonial stuff. And then Numbers chapter 16, we'll try to get into that as well. But the Israelites are just a bunch of gripers and complainers. They're griping all of the time. They griped back in the book of Exodus that they didn't have any food, so God gave them manna. Numbers chapter 11, they're griping about the manna, that this worthless manna is drying us out. This is stuff that God gave them. And they said, we remember the food that we had back in the land of Egypt, with the fish, the leeks, the cucumbers, the onions. I don't know if any of you guys consider those amongst your favorite vegetable or not, but I don't see any farmers of leeks entering the billionaire club. But anyway, they remembered all that food. And they're talking about how, you hear people that talk about the good old days, right? Could you ever imagine somebody saying, I remember the good old days when we were slaves in Egypt. I remember the good old days when we were being beaten and forced to make bricks. We even had to go gather our own straw. Yeah. Is that what you was going to say?
They were made to get their own supplies and materials.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can remember the good old days when we was able to eat all of these high-calorie foods like leeks and onions and garlic, which are all low-calorie foods. We talked about that on Wednesday night. But they're remembering with fondness something that God rescued them from. If you remember Exodus chapter 2, God heard the groanings of the Israelites in the land of Egypt. That's why he sent Moses to rescue them from there. It was because of their groanings and their complainings. And yet they're wanting to go back. So we talked about all that in Numbers chapter 11. Now we're going to look at Numbers chapter 12, and we want to talk about how another point of discontent is Moses. And this is going to arise from Miriam and Aaron. Somebody read for me just the entirety of Numbers chapter 12. It's not very long. Somebody wanted to read Numbers chapter 12. Go ahead, Melissa.
Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. For he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek, more than all the people who were on the face of the earth. And suddenly the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, come out, you three, to the tent of meeting. And the three of them came out. And the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent, and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. And he said, hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in riddles. And he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. When the cloud removed from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, like snow. And Aaron turned to Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, oh, my Lord, do not punish us because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, whose flesh is half eaten away when he comes out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried to the Lord, oh God, please heal her, please. But the Lord said to Moses,
All right. You pronounce those names however you want to pronounce them, because that's just as I pronounce them anyway. What was the argument that Miriam and Aaron had against Moses? All right. His wife was the wrong country person. So they said, right? Well, what was their complaint against her? All right. They said they brought up an accusation against Moses against the fact that he married a Cushite woman or an Ethiopian woman. But then it immediately goes into the next section there. Has the Lord indeed only spoken through Moses and not through us? So they gave a pretense of being able to make an argument against Moses, against this Cushite woman. But really their argument was the fact that Moses had the preeminence amongst the three of them. Now, granted, if you look in Micah chapter... Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Yeah, they were jealous of Moses. I mean, it's just simply that. They really didn't have a gripe against the woman that he married. It would have probably expounded upon that even further if that was their legitimate gripe. But the legitimate gripe there was the second thing that was mentioned in verse 2. Has God only spoken through Moses? Has he spoken through all of us? Now, if you look in Micah chapter 6, Micah does indeed talk about how Miriam, Aaron, and Moses were all leaders through whom God brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But Moses was the preeminent one. Moses was the one that God met in the wilderness, in the flaming bush, the bush that was aflame and was not being consumed. God was the one who talked to Moses and told him to go back into Egypt to rescue his people from there. And God said, I'll even have Aaron as your spokesman, and you'll be like God to him, and you'll tell him what I'm telling you, and he'll be your spokesman to Pharaoh and to those people. And maybe that relationship continued on where God was speaking to Moses, but Moses was conveying the message to Aaron, and Aaron was the spokesman amongst the people. But anyway, Miriam and Aaron seemed to be jealous of this esteem that Moses has had. And the very next verse says something that's very interesting. What does verse 3 tell you? Most humble man. What does humility mean? What is humility? What is entailed in humility? What does it mean to be meek or humble? All right, understanding takes a lot of, it takes patience, takes a lot of maturity to be a humble person. Does it mean you're weak? Sometimes people say meek rhymes with weak, and that's what meekness means. It means weakness. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So we talked about Jesus being Savior and Lord. When God called us in the context of humility, that's the attribute that allows Jesus to be Lord. Without humility, he will never be Lord of our life. So that's the essence of humility.
Yeah. I mean, he took on the form of a bondservant and came to this earth so that he could rescue mankind. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Humility is somebody who can exert leadership capabilities without lording it over people. As Carrie was talking, I was thinking about Kenny Rogers song, Coward of the County? You remember that song? Where a man is just taking all sorts of grief from others in the county until eventually they just push him too far. And then he has to show them where he stands. A person who's meek or humble doesn't mean he doesn't stand for anything or that he's a pushover and he just goes with the crowd. That's not what a meek person does, or a humble person does. A meek person or a humble person is a person who knows where they stand, a person who knows who they are and are comfortable in their skin enough to be able to take that position. A lot of people in our society are willing to go with the popular vote, and depending on where they want to be able to take a position on anything. But a humble person, like Moses, is willing to be able to take a stand. And I think that verse 3 is put in there, and in my translation, in the New King James Version, it has it in parentheses. I don't know if it's just an addendum put in there later, but it said that the Lord was the one who talked to Moses and Miriam and Aaron in the next verse. If you've ever been, when you were a child and you were ever called before your parents, you knew sometimes it was not a good thing. And I think that this is one of those things where it's happening right here with Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. Moses and Miriam and Aaron get called to the tabernacle meeting to come before God. And then when they get to the tabernacle meeting, Moses separates Miriam and Aaron apart by themselves. And you know that it's not going to be good news for them. And then we have what's said in verses 6, 7, and 8. Hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream, but not so my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings. And he sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And if you remember back in Exodus chapter 33, God allowed Moses to be able to stand in a cleft of the rock, and he would cover him over there with his hand. And he says, I'll allow you to see my back parts, but no man may be able to see my face because he'll die. And so he covered him over, and he passed by, and he removed his hand, and he allowed Moses to be able to see him. And I think that God's referencing that. God is telling them that I am with Moses. And then the anger of the Lord is aroused. What happens to Miriam? Okay, she turns into a leper. Aaron immediately recognizes the fault. He says, please, please don't let her die. We've sinned. He even admits we've sinned. And so Moses prays for them and Miriam is healed. But she still has to remain outside the camp for 7 days. And if you go back to Leviticus chapter 13, that's in reference to all the cleanliness ceremonies in regards to lepers, that they had to be outside the camp for 7 days. The priest was to look them over. If the leprosy had been subsided, then they were allowed back in the camp. If not, then they were to remain outside the camp another 7 days and be checked upon every 7 days thereafter. And so Miriam was shut outside the camp 7 days. Who was older between Miriam and Aaron? Miriam was. And we know this because when Moses was let down in the water, it was Miriam that watched over him there. And in Exodus chapter 7, if you look at Exodus chapter 7, when Moses makes his way back into the land of Egypt to be able to confront with Aaron, it talked about how Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83. So Moses and Aaron are only about 3 years apart. In fact, if you look at Moses' life, his life could be divided into 3 groups of 40, I guess. 40 years with the land of Egypt before he goes to meet up with his father-in-law Jethro, or gets driven out of the land of Egypt. Then he stays in the wilderness raising sheep for his father-in-law Jethro for 40 years. And he comes back and rescues the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. And then he goes in the wilderness wanderings for 40 years before he dies on top on the mountain. Yeah. And I mean, not only was leprosy described all sorts of skin diseases back in the day, even dandruff or eczema would be considered leprosy back in the day, but there was a type of leprosy that could cost your life. I can only assume that this was the type of leprosy that Miriam had contracted because Aaron was pleading for her to be healed. He had thought this was going to be the death of her. And because she's listed first in Numbers chapter 12, verse 1, I can only suppose that she's the one who incited this in the first place. Aaron, if you look at Aaron in his life, a lot of times he appears more to be a follower than a leader because he followed what the children of Israel wanted to do when Moses went up on the mountain to get the Ten Commandments. They said, well, he's been up there too long. Let's make us another god. And so he says, well, bring me your gold and all that stuff. And he said, let's carve it into a calf. And so he did what the people wanted him to do. In fact, when Moses came back down from the mountain and asked Aaron about it, he says, well, this is what the people wanted to do. And he gives the pretense that we just put the gold in the fire and poof, this calf came back out. And we just supposed that this was our God, right? So that was the story Aaron wanted to give because he was kind of a go-between between Moses and the people, but he was also a people pleaser. He wanted to please the people. And Moses was the one who was willing to be able to take the stand because that's where God stood. And so Aaron, he seems to be like this guy who wants to be able to just go with the flow. And when Miriam brings up this argument that, hey, God hasn't just spoken through him, he's also spoken through us. We're also leaders. We're his older siblings. We knew him when he was a baby. You know, you always get that sort of thing where even Jesus, when he went back to his hometown, he didn't get any respect in his hometown because we knew him when he was like this tiny, right? I'm supposing that's what's happening between Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. Like, we knew him when he was still in his diapers or something. But, you know, they needed to gain respect for their brother and also in common a respect for God. But anyway, she stays outside the camp, and I think it was Kari that brought up in class one time that when you are outside the camp, there's a period of isolation, social isolation that goes on along with that idea of being able to be outside the camp like that. Numbers chapter 13. You're going to talk about Numbers 13 in your lesson, so we're not going to cover that. But I want to be able to cover another incident in Numbers 16 where Moses is also being challenged on his authority. Remember, Moses is the most humble man, the most meek man to walk the face of the earth. Let me get my notes situated here, right? I think I've put them out of order. Okay, here we go. All right, Numbers chapter 16. Incident in verse number 1, it says it starts off with Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Pelet, the son of Reuben, and they took men. Now remember, it was just before, it was Moses and Moses, Miriam, and Aaron were having a disagreement. Especially Miriam and Aaron were challenging Moses' authority, and they wanted some of that authority themselves. As we talked about, they were jealous of Moses. They wanted some recognition. Now we have, how many people are bringing up this argument against Moses in number 16? There's a lot of names there, but how many people are coming up before Moses? 3? Three prominent ones, right? 4. Who are the 4? And On, the son of Pelet. Now On, we don't really know much about him after this verse right here because he kind of falls by the wayside. He's probably a follower of these other group. But the prominent one is Korah. Korah is from what tribe? He's from the tribe of Levi, which means he's kin to Moses. It says Korah is the son of Izhar, who is the son of Kohath. Now you may remember Levi had 3 sons. Kohath was one of those sons. And Amram was his brother. Amram is the father of Moses and Aaron. So if you follow it down, Korah is the son of, actually I got that wrong. Kohath and Amram, make sure I got that right. Korah is the son of Kohath, who's the son of he's the son of Kohath, he's the son of Izhar, who's the son of Kohath. Kohath is the son of Levi. Izhar is the son of Kohath. Izhar and Amram were brothers. Izhar and Amram were brothers, which makes Moses and Korah cousins. So the man who's bringing up this accusation against Moses is a cousin to Abraham and Moses. And they get a group together, and they're bringing up an accusation against Moses. And let's go ahead and read through here. Can I get somebody to read verses 2 through about verse 11, please? Go ahead, please. All right. Is there anything in that section right there that you just learned today, or maybe just refreshed yourself about today, that you had not noticed before? All right. He stands up for himself a little bit. But he's talking to Korah. Before he stands up for himself, in verse 4, I thought that was interesting. I had not noticed that before. Talking about Moses' humility and meekness. When Moses heard it, he fell on his face. Same type of thing happened in Numbers chapter 14 when, they failed to go into the promised land, and they're bringing up this accusation against Moses, saying, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? And we sent spies in there. We found out that there are giants in there, and they failed to go take the promised land. Moses and Aaron also prostrate themselves before the people before they respond to the people. An act of humility, an act of obeisance to the people. They realized what their position was. Moses realized what his position was. He was to serve God in relation to his interaction with the people. So he bows before the people. He prostrates himself before the people. He falls on his face before he responds to Kohath and Amram. Anybody else notice anything? We said that Korah was the son of Kohath, and if you go back to the book of Leviticus, you'll note, not that far, I guess, back to Numbers, the early part of book of Numbers chapter 4. You go back there and you find out that Kohath, because of the tribe that he came from, because of the family that he came from, he was doing service before the Lord. Go back to Numbers chapter 4. I want to be able to look at some of the service that he was responsible for. Numbers chapter 4. Because Moses brings that up to him. He says, that was part of Moses' accusation against Korah. He says, "Hear now, you sons of Levi, is it a small thing to you that God, the God of Israel, has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord and stand before the congregation to serve them." Well, what is Moses talking about? God is bringing Korah near to him and doing the service of the tabernacle of the Lord. If you go back to Numbers chapter 4, he says there at the very beginning of Numbers chapter 4, "The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Take a census of the sons of Kohath from among the children of Levi by their families and by their father's house, from 30 years old and above, even to 50 years old, all who entered the service to do the work of the tabernacle of meeting. And this is the service of the sons of Kohath in the tabernacle of meeting relating to the most holy things. When the camp prepares to journey, Aaron and his sons shall come, and they shall take down the covering veil and cover the ark of the testimony with it, and they shall put on it the covering of badger skins, and spread over that a cloth of entirely blue, and they shall insert its poles." And if you continue on down through there, you find out that the children of Kohath, where Korah is from, their responsibility was to carry the items from inside the tabernacle. They were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. They were carrying everything that was inside of that tabernacle in relation to do the service of the Lord. Things that only the high priest could touch, or the sons of the high priest could touch. And so they were touching the most, or they were carrying the most holy things. Later on in Numbers chapter 8, you'll find out that there were some oxen and some carts dedicated for the service of the tabernacle, and they were distributed amongst the other two sons of Korah there, but they weren't distributed to the sons of Kohath, because Kohath, they carried the most holy things. So when the Ark of the Tabernacle, or when the tabernacle was torn down, it was the first thing to be torn down. The children of Israel left camp first, and they erected that tabernacle back up before the rest of the congregation of the children of Israel were able to enter the camp. So they were the first to leave camp, and they were the first to arrive at the new spot. And Kohath, they didn't get any oxen or carts to carry anything, because they carried the most holy things. And so that's what Moses is talking about here with Kohath. He says, why are you bringing this up? Or with Korah. He says, why are you bringing this up? Isn't it your responsibility to be able to dedicate or touch the most holy things, the tabernacle of God? And he's brought you near to himself. Do you seek the priesthood also? Again, we find out that this is exactly what they're wanting to do. They're wanting to be able to receive the acclaim. Later on, as you'll see in the next verse, after he talks about complaining against Aaron, Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they will not come up. So we see Dathan and Abiram also in their rebellion against Moses. But he seems to have disappeared. Somebody read for us verses 13 through verse 27, please. All right, now we have a division. They were wanting to cause a division. Now, Aaron and Miriam and Moses, I call that a challenge to Moses' leadership amongst the leaders. It was really a division or an argument amongst the people who were considered the leaders of the children of Israel. But here is a division where this division is got a considerable amount of people. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, they've got a considerable following behind them. And they've got quite a bit of people. So Moses makes a challenge. He says, all right, we'll find out who God belongs to him. And in fact, when he calls for Dathan and Abiram, one of their things that they said was intriguing to me. He calls for Dathan and Abiram to come out of the camp, and they wouldn't come. What was the first thing that they said to Moses? What was their first accusation against Moses there? Yeah, but one of the first things they said right there, is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey? They're remembering with fondness this slavery in Egypt, aren't they? You've brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey, and you haven't brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey. Now, we understand from Numbers chapter 13 and Numbers chapter 14, that was not Moses' fault. That was their own fault. They believed the 10 spies who brought the bad report, and they didn't believe Caleb and Joshua. But he says, you brought us up out of a land with milk and honey. You're not taking us into a land flowing with milk and honey, and you're going to kill us in this wilderness. Again, also not Moses' fault. That was something that God presided upon them. But still, they wanted to be able to have, some sort of recognition. He says, because you should keep, why is it that you should keep acting like a prince over us? You've not brought us into the land. And Moses was very angry. He said, I don't want you to respect their offering. I've not taken anything from them. I've not taken a donkey from them. I've not taken anything to hurt them, or I've not done anything to hurt them. And so one of the things I find interesting here is that Moses said to Korah, tomorrow you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they as well as Aaron. Let each take his censer and put incense in it, and each of you bring his censer before the Lord, 250 censers, both you and Aaron, each with his censer. So he wants everybody to be consecrated before the Lord, so he wants them to be able to have their censer. But when they put fire upon it, and they stood at the door of the tabernacle and meeting, Moses and Aaron, this is what God tells them. He says, I want you to separate from these men. God's going to make a distinction. Again, it's one of those things where, remember in Numbers chapter 12, God calls Moses, Miriam, and Aaron before him, and then he separates Moses away from Miriam and Aaron. Here we have Moses and Aaron on one side, and then we have Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, and all of their people on the other side. So he's making a distinction between the two. He's recognizing who the argument is between. In the first instance, the argument was between Moses and Miriam and Aaron. This one here, if you were in a court of law, the plaintiffs would be Korah, Dathan, and Abiram with their challenges against Moses and Aaron would be the defendants on the other side. So he's separating the two sides. It's not going to go well for Dathan and Abiram and Korah. Let's continue reading. Verse 28. Moses said, by this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. If these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, so it was almost immediately after he said this, that the ground split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the men with Korah and all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. Then all Israel who went around them fled at their cry, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up also." And a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Tell Eleazar the son of Aaron, the priest, to pick up the censers out of the blaze, for they are holy, and scatter the fire some distance away. The censers of these men who sinned against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, because they presented them before the Lord. Therefore they are holy, and they shall be a sign to the children of Israel." So Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers, which those who were burned up had presented, and they were hammered out as a covering on the altar to be a memorial to the children of Israel, that no outsider who is not a descendant of Aaron should come near to offer incense before the Lord, that it might not be made like Korah and his companions, just as the Lord had said to him. Now, we understand that there's a new profound respect for the leadership of Moses, because Moses is saying, if these men are visited by the common fate of all man, or if they just die like any other man, then God hasn't spoken by me. But if God invents a new thing, and the earth opens up its mouth and swallows them alive, then God obviously has spoken by me. At first, when I first read this story many years ago, I was thinking that the men who had had the golden censers, the censers of consecration, were also swallowed up in that gaping of the earth, but they weren't. It's only Dathan and Abiram and their families that were by themselves, separated by themselves. Those are the ones who were swallowed up by the earth. It says the men who had offered up the golden censers, or the incense on the censers, they're the ones who were consumed by the Lord later on. But those censers were hammered out into plates to cover the altar, and it served as a testimony for this incident right here. And this incident was one of those things that brought profound respect upon Moses and Aaron and their leadership. Anybody got anything else they would like to add in regards to today's class? Yes, sir. Yeah. It always seems interesting to me, though, when in both of these cases, before they bring an accusation against Moses, the person who's bringing the accusation, in the first instance, probably Miriam, who instigated the thing, but she's got to have some sort of person there with her to bring alongside her to kind of represent her side as well. Like, the more I have on my side, it gives me a little bit of comfort before I bring the accusation. The same thing happens with Korah. He gets Dathan and Abiram and on their families and their groups, and he even goes out there amongst the congregation of the people and gathers some of the leaders of the men, people of renown, people that were well known. He gets them on his side before he goes up there and challenges Moses and Aaron. But it doesn't mean that you're right. Just because you have more numbers doesn't mean you're right. And sometimes people will get in an argument and they'll think that because I argue louder, I must be more right than you are because you're not willing to argue up. You're not willing to speak up for yourself. But just because you have more numbers, just because you might be louder in your vocal argument doesn't mean that you're going to be right. But thank you for the class this morning, and we'll meet up next week. Thank you.